She was crying in the streets of Manila with a broken voice and an empty stomach, singing not for fame but to survive one more night. No one stopped. No one cared. Until one police officer and his dog made a choice that would change her life forever. If you believe one moment can rewrite destiny, subscribe now, because this story will stay with you long after the video ends. In the crowded heart of Manila, where jeepneys roared like restless beasts and neon lights flickered over cracked sidewalks, lived a young Filipina woman named Althea Cruz. She was 21 years old, but hardship had already carved years into her eyes. Every evening, as the sun dipped behind tangled power lines, Althea stood near a busy pedestrian bridge with a borrowed microphone and a small portable speaker held together by tape. She sang not to chase dreams but to quiet hunger. Her voice floated above the noise, rich and trembling, filled with a sadness that didn't beg for pity but told a truth no one wanted to hear. Althea had once believed in a future. She grew up in a narrow room in Tondo with a mother who cleaned houses and a father who drove a tricycle until illness took him away. Music had been her escape. As a child, she sang while washing dishes, sang while doing laundry, sang lullabies to herself when the electricity went out. Her mother used to smile and say her voice sounded like hope. But hope is fragile when rent is due and rice runs out. When her mother passed away suddenly from a fever they couldn't afford to treat, Althea's world collapsed quietly, without headlines or condolences. She left school and took whatever work she could find. Factory lines, food stalls, cleaning jobs. Each one slipped through her fingers as companies downsized or wages disappeared. Singing became the last thing she owned. The streets of Manila became her stage, and strangers became her audience, though most passed without listening. Coins clinked into her cup some nights. Other nights, nothing. One humid evening, rain clouds hung low and the air felt heavy, like something was about to break. Althea was singing a song her mother loved, her voice cracking on the high notes. She hadn't eaten since morning. Her legs trembled, but she kept going because stopping meant silence, and silence meant defeat. A few people slowed down, then moved on. One man laughed and shook his head. A woman glanced at her phone and crossed the street. That was when Officer Daniel Reyes noticed her. Daniel had been on patrol for nearly 12 hours. A former military man turned city cop, he carried exhaustion in his shoulders and routine in his steps. Beside him walked his canine partner, a German shepherd named Max. Max was trained to detect danger, drugs, explosives. He was disciplined, alert, and loyal. What he wasn't trained for was music. Yet as they approached the pedestrian bridge, Max slowed. His ears lifted. His tail stilled. Daniel followed the dog's gaze and heard the voice. It cut through the traffic like a quiet confession. Daniel stopped without realizing it. He had heard street singers before. Most were loud, chasing attention. This was different. Althea's voice sounded like someone singing to keep from disappearing. Max sat down, something he never did unless commanded. People walked around them, annoyed, impatient, unaware that something invisible had just shifted. Althea noticed the uniform and felt fear crawl up her spine. Police often chased street performers away, citing permits and noise complaints. Her heart raced, but she kept singing, because fear had already taken so much from her. When the song ended, silence filled the space between them. Daniel didn't speak right away. He reached into his pocket and pulled out money, more than most people ever gave. He placed it gently into her cup. Althea bowed her head, whispering thank you, her eyes burning. Max stepped closer, sniffed her hand, then rested his head against her knee. The contact broke something inside her. Tears spilled freely, no longer hidden behind melody. Daniel asked her name. She told him. He asked why she was crying while singing. She tried to smile but failed. She said sometimes pain sounds better when it's sung. Daniel nodded, because somehow he understood. He told her to keep singing and moved on, but Max refused to leave. The dog looked back again and again until Daniel finally sighed and allowed him a few more moments. That night should have ended there. A small kindness in a city full of indifference. But fate wasn't finished. 2 nights later, Daniel was assigned to the same area. As he approached the bridge, he noticed a crowd. Not the usual rush of commuters, but a tight circle of people arguing. In the center, Althea stood frozen while a man shouted at her, accusing her of stealing his speaker. He grabbed her arm, hard enough to leave marks. Fear flashed across her face. Daniel intervened immediately. The man backed off, cursing, claiming ownership without proof. Max growled low, a warning that ended the argument. Witnesses stepped forward, saying they'd seen Althea perform there for weeks. The man fled. Althea collapsed onto the curb, shaking. Daniel crouched beside her, asking if she was hurt. She said no, but her voice betrayed her. Daniel realized then how vulnerable she was. Singing on the streets wasn't just hard. It was dangerous. He offered to walk her home. She hesitated, then agreed. They walked through narrow alleys until they reached a rundown boarding house. Her room was barely big enough for a mattress and a small table. Daniel saw the reality she lived in and felt anger at a system that let talent rot in corners. Before leaving, Daniel asked a simple question that would change everything. He asked if she had ever recorded her singing. Althea laughed softly. She said recordings were for people with money and connections. Daniel thought of his sister, a social media manager who loved music. An idea formed. He asked Althea if she trusted him enough to let him help. Desperation and hope collided in her chest. She nodded. The next day, Daniel's sister Maria brought a phone, a small microphone, and a folding chair. Althea sang under the same bridge where she had cried days before. Max lay beside her like a guardian. They recorded one song. Just one. No editing. No filters. Raw emotion poured into the camera. When Maria uploaded it, she didn't expect much. By morning, the video had thousands of views. People commented about the voice that sounded like pain and prayer combined. They asked who she was. They asked where they could help. By the end of the week, the video had millions of views across platforms. News outlets reached out. Music producers asked for meetings. Donations poured in, enough to cover rent, food, and medical care she'd been avoiding. Althea was overwhelmed. Fame arrived fast and loud, and she was still the girl who sang to survive. Then came the twist she never saw coming. A talent agency offered her a contract that promised stardom but demanded ownership of her voice and story. The money was tempting. Daniel warned her to read carefully. Maria connected her with a lawyer who worked pro bono. The contract was a trap. Althea walked away, even though it meant uncertainty. Days later, a well-known Filipino-American producer contacted her directly, saying he'd seen the video not because it was viral, but because his mother shared it with tears in her eyes. He offered mentorship, not control. He offered time, not pressure. Althea moved into a small apartment. She started vocal training. She sang in charity events, not forgetting where she came from. Daniel attended her first small concert, standing in the back with Max. When Althea spotted them, her voice wavered, but she finished the song stronger than ever. Months later, Althea stood on a stage she had only seen on television. Lights warmed her face. The audience listened in silence. She told her story before she sang, about a night she cried under a bridge and a police officer who stopped to listen, and a dog who sat down because something in her voice felt like home. Her song ended in thunderous applause. Daniel never took credit. He said he just did his job. Max wagged his tail, unaware he had become a symbol of compassion across the internet. Althea sent money to girls still singing on the streets. She funded meals near the bridge where her life changed. She sang not from hunger anymore, but from gratitude. And in a city that never sleeps, one voice had proven that sometimes, all it takes to change a life is someone willing to stop, listen, and care.